It's 3 a.m. on February the 24th, 2022, Kyiv, Ukraine. For weeks, the world has wondered if Russia would invade. And tonight, the wait is over. The airport is bombed. Citizens panic and evacuate the city. But as many flee, some are staying to do their job.
You know, you'd see the tracers going, explosions, and you learn to you don't have to worry until you can feel the buildings shake. If you start feeling the shaking, then it's getting close and it's like, all right, might be a bit worried.
For most of us, war is just a headline. For Michael Downey, it's what he sees through his camera lens, standing on the front lines to bring these stories to the world.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Hello and welcome to another episode of No Ordinary Monday. Thank you so much for joining us. I am your host, Chris Barron, and each week I sit down with a guest whose job is far from ordinary. We explore how they got there, what it's really like behind the scenes, and then they'll deep dive into the single most unforgettable experience of their career. Our guest this week is someone who doesn't just watch history unfold, he captures it. His office is often in a war zone or some other far-flung place, giving a voice to civilians, soldiers, and anyone else impacted by conflict. Michael Downey is a conflict cinematographer and director of photography who has built a career filming in difficult conditions, sometimes in the line of fire. His camera has documented conflicts in the Middle East, Ukraine, and beyond. Michael and I have worked together a couple of times on documentary projects. He's really a fantastic guy to have on a shoot, not just because he's talented, but also because he's full of amazing stories, and I'm really delighted he agreed to come on the podcast. As you heard in that intro, Michael's big story takes us back to the early days of the Ukraine war and his experiences capturing those events. So stay tuned for a real behind-the-scenes look at what it's like to be a conflict cinematographer and what it takes to capture history. You're listening to No Ordinary Monday. Let's get into the show. Michael Downey, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Good. Very good. Thank you for having me.
Where are you at the moment?
I'm in LA right now, house sitting, watching the dog and working on an edit. It's just shooting in the Sonoran Desert along the Mexico border for a little over a month. Well, like 7 weeks.
Nice. And, immigration stuff, I'm guessing. All the stuff, hot topics in the news.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Never a dull moment.
Nice. Well, I was going to say, this is actually kind of unusual for us because you're usually sitting next to me behind the camera as we're interviewing someone else, but actually the roles are reversed today and you're the one at the end of the camera being interviewed.
Yeah, exactly. It is a bit strange, actually.
Have you been?
Normally, I'd be the one going, Chris, no, we stop. We got to cut. The sound's off, or something.
Yeah, the sound's
now
off.
I don't have to do any of that.
Yeah. Have you been interviewed before? Just out of curiosity.
Oh yeah. I mean, news stuff. For CNN and BBC after something happened in the Middle East or Ukraine. A rocket attack or something. Doing lives. So yeah, pretty used to it.
Nice. Well, actually, we should just say that you and I have, I think the last time that we saw each other in the flesh was probably on a minefield somewhere in an undisclosed location. But actually, the first time we saw each other was on a shoot in an ice cave in Italy, which I think was very much, what's interesting about that is because that was very much my comfort zone, dangling on a rope in a cave somewhere. And that was very new to you at the time. And then the second project that we did together was vice versa. We were kind of in a more war-torn environment that was much more your comfort zone and less so mine.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's the Zingarella, rappelling down. What was it? I don't know, 300 meters?
It was like 200 meters.
Yeah, that final rappel, when you came out of the ice plug, that literally took my breath away. And everything in your head when you came off that little ice chute, because it was basically a tunnel that water had made, and then it just spits you out. You know, if you weren't on a rope, if you slipped, it would basically be like a bumping slide and then just shoot you off to your death. But like, yeah, pushing off of that was everything in your brain is telling you like, don't do that. Don't do that. That's crazy. So yeah, I got, you know, that was, it was fun being a little bit more out of my comfort zone, you know, for once on a shoot. But
yeah, no, that's great. Yeah. So I guess like obviously for folks, I usually play the sort of directing and producing role, and you're usually the cinematographer on some of these projects. But I guess, you know, those kinds of projects like documentary, science, factual stuff, that's not the only sort of string to your bow. I guess if you were to describe what you do for a living to folks, what's the best way to describe what you do?
I mean, it's a mix of things, because yeah, some of it is, you know, these documentary, you know, series or features that are more highly controlled. But you know, with some of the stuff I do, you know, covering conflicts, you know, I've covered the Middle East for 14 years for BBC, Channel 4, New York Times, Vice. You know, Libya, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, you know, very unpredictable. And you're hitting the ground running and getting your bearings and figuring out, you know, what's happening, what's the story, get a lay of the land. And yeah, it's really, it can be very, very intense, very high pace. So yeah.
I guess, you know, a lot of DOPs or cinematographer, director of photography or cinematographer, like, you have the luxury of like, you know, time, space, getting the beauty shots, like, but you're not just getting the shots. Like, you've probably got to have, like, as you said, you may or may not even have a producer. You're kind of sent. You basically get a phone call. Stuff is happening in a particular location. Here's a plane ticket. Pack your kit. Get to the location, and then, like, what happens from when you get off the plane usually?
Yeah, so I mean, sometimes it's, you know, I'll get a call and it's like, you know, can you go in the next few hours, jump on a plane because something's happened. Like over a year ago, there was an earthquake in Morocco, and New York Times called and said, can you go, you know, right away? So went there, had a translator, and it was basically just going around, you know, I had to find a driver. So you're landing on the ground, trying to sort out basic logistics and things, and then thinking, well, we got to get out there like right away. And kind of driving around the Atlas Mountains, which, you know, roads are destroyed, there's landslides, just complete chaos. And you're trying to figure out how to get around all that. And, you know, still thinking, you know, you got to get the story. Part of it is, you know, you can make, you know, the obstacles are getting into place part of the story, but you're like, okay, well, that only fills a very small part of it. Now we actually have to get to this village. We have to talk to people. We have to talk to rescue workers, you know?
Yeah.
So it's always, it's a little bit stressful to say the least, you know? And then when you're done shooting, you know, driving back on a really bumpy road, you know, and you see rocks tumbling off, and it's, a little freaky, but you're trying to edit in the car on the way back, and, you know, it's because you have to, you know, it's news, so you've got to get things filed and sent pretty quickly.
Yeah, totally. And I guess the other thing you mentioned slightly earlier is that, you know, some of the times when you're working, you might be in conflict, you know, so either you are under direct threat to your life or your well-being, or you're seeing direct threats happening to other people, and you might see some really sort of rough stuff from time to time. How do you deal with that kind of aspect of the job?
You know, I think doing it for so long, I mean, the way I see it is, it might be similar of how like a doctor or a surgeon, you know, dealing with something is, you've got a job to do, and that's really it. You just compartmentalize and see it that way. I think also, I mean, for me, filming, it helps a lot because you're seeing it through the camera. You know, it's not like you're there
like
witnessing it. Yeah, it's like exactly. It's not like you're just there and part of it. You're documenting it, and you've got this filter. Also, it definitely helps. It's a place that's not home. I mean, when I went back to Beirut, because I'd lived there for 8 years, documenting the blast, that was really difficult because my neighborhood was destroyed. Everything that I'd known was pretty much wiped out. So that was a very different experience than normally you're going, to conflicts around the world where you don't have any, you're not a stakeholder in it. You're not from there. You're fortunate enough to, when you're done, you leave that, go far away, and you're back in, the safety and comfort of your home. So that makes it easier too, that it's not, you don't have this emotional attachment to a place. Yeah. And then, I mean, the thing about that kind of work is the more you do it, stuff doesn't faze you anymore. You just
so the first time it was quite shocking, but then
and then you just get more acclimatized to it. I think it's really, unfortunately, it's like anything. After a while, you're just kind of like, okay. It's same with going to a conflict zone where if there's shelling or there's bombing, you're just kind of like, well, okay. You learn to you don't have to worry until you can feel the buildings shake. If you start feeling the shaking, then it's getting close, and it's like, all right, might be a bit worried, but yeah. And I think it's a bit of a mental kind of defense mechanism, because if every time you were kind of overwhelmed and shot, you couldn't do your job. So you do kind of have to adapt and get used to that too. But it's problematic too, because that stuff's not normal. Yeah. So you want to be, cognizant of the fact that this is not normal. Try not to completely normalize this or act like, oh, it's fine. It's like, no, you do need sometimes to assess things and kind of unpack and stuff and process things a bit,
but not letting it impede your work in the moment, just sort of package that away to digest later.
Exactly. Yeah. While you're working, while you're there, it's like, do not unpack and process there. Get the job done, and then after do a debrief. I mean, now it's becoming, it was a bit taboo, I think even just 10 years ago, where people wouldn't talk about mental health in the industry or anything, and now it's become much more common for these big organizations to have mandatory debriefings and be like, hey, you're good, I know, but we want you to talk to, everyone's gonna have a session or a few with the company therapist or whoever. Yeah. Because it's that stuff definitely can, over time, obviously have an effect, seeing just repeated traumatic events and stuff. I mean, there's some people that deal with it and are healthy with how they deal with it, and then there's others you see that do not handle it well. They're just will find every vice and excessiveness and just kind of slowly destroying themselves, which is not not very healthy.
I mean, in saying all this stuff, obviously you guys have seen and done some and witnessed some crazy things, but at the end of the day, I mean, do you love your job? Do you love what you do?
Yeah, I mean, it's I've always said it's like you have a front seat to history. I mean, being all these places, Ukraine, when Russia, did the full-scale invasion in 2022. I mean, just shocking moments, obviously a changing point for this century. And then you've got, the Arab Spring in Egypt, in Cairo, when Mubarak fell. That was, I was on stage in Tahrir Square. There was I think 2 million, 3 million people all around there. It was
Jeez.
absolutely incredible. So getting to see these moments firsthand, and and then seeing how those moments then are portrayed or documented or written about in news, books, and things, and you see, you can see how history is written, and then when you're there for it, you're like, okay, yeah, I mean, but it's missing. You
Interesting.
see the some of the nuances and stuff that are how a very complex event or situation will get boiled down into a headline or a little bit and be overly simplified, or
Yeah.
how, when one side wins, how history gets written in their favor, I mean, like, Mohamed Morsi was the democratically elected president of Egypt, was ousted in a coup by President Sisi, military coup that, all of us seeing that firsthand of how history was kind of rewritten by Sisi and the winning side, that it was, that was pretty interesting.
All right. So before we go into your big story, I kind of want to know your origin story, starting from, I guess, what you wanted to be as a kid and how you got into what you're doing today.
Oh God, what did I, when I was a kid, I mean, when I was 5, I wanted to be a paleontologist.
Nice.
You think dinosaurs, and then you learn what paleontology actually is, and it's, not long in the field. Well, it's like a little bit of time in the field, digging very carefully, not, it's pretty tedious. And then the rest is, in labs and stuff. So, as I got older, I was like, well,
I like the field
it's
part.
not like Jurassic Park. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so after that, after your paleontology dream died,
After the 5 years old, I when I was, I think, like most young people, I wasn't really sure. I thought, as a senior in high school, I was like, oh, I want to do business. I knew I wanted to travel. I wanted something international, so I was just like, international business. So when I went to school at Western Washington University, I started off that the plan was doing international business, and then there were Arabic classes, so I studied Arabic. I was like, well, that could get me out there. But it didn't take long. I think it was the second semester, my first accounting class, where I was like, yeah, no, this is not what I want to do at all. And the more, older I got, a bit more wisdom, education and stuff, I just realized, like, business for the sake of business just wasn't interesting. It wasn't, my goal in life, just making money or whatever. And so then, I just kept studying Arabic, and it didn't take long. Like, so after, it was my end of junior year, I realized, I was like, well, I've been spending so much time on Arabic, like, I might as well just major in this. Otherwise, if I change majors, I'm gonna be at school forever.
yeah. And you didn't have like a life goal at this point. You were just like, I'm sticking with the Arabic because it's what I know best at this particular moment.
Yeah, it was just kind of like, kind of a bit nonchalant about it. Like, well, it's a bachelor's degree. Like, we'll see. Yeah. And then I ran out of Arabic classes to take at Western Washington University, so I went to American University in Cairo. And then I was, my minor was international relations. So then I was writing my thesis about the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. And I remember I would be skipping out on a lot of my Arabic classes to go to these, to make contact with the Muslim Brotherhood. At the time, they were semi-tolerated, but still illegal. So getting a hold of them, you'd like send an email. They'd say, call this guy, text him, figure out like who you are and stuff. And Yeah, once they were like, oh, you're a student, yeah, of course. So,
But you were American. Like, you weren't even Egyptian or Arabic. Did they not have a problem with that?
no, it was fine. I mean, I think, generally there's, probably a little bit of a suspicion of like, oh, is this guy intelligent? But
Yeah.
I was 20 years old.
Yeah.
So, they're like, they could tell like this is a inexperienced kid,
Yeah.
And they're like, all right, we'll humor you, we'll give you, we'll interview you and stuff. So the question was more about, I mean, the thesis was just like basically about correlation between Muslim Brotherhood and its founding, and then where it is today. And after I finished that, I was just kind of like, I've got this guy here. He was Khalid Hamza, who was on the Shura Council, like some of the leadership of the Muslim Brotherhood there. And I was just thinking, in the bit of time I was in Egypt, I could tell how unhappy people were with Mubarak and just the state of things. They would always say, they'd be careful of how they said stuff. They'd be like, Mubarak, I hope he sleeps. And you're like, okay, that's
Yeah.
interesting way of putting it. So I told him I was like, well, let's talk about, the future of Egypt. Mubarak's getting old. When he dies, if there are free and fair elections, where do you stand on, how secular would your government be, women's rights, these things, and just sat on it. I didn't think anything of it. It wasn't going to be part of my thesis. And then, I went back to do my last semester at Western Washington University, and the protests start happening in Egypt. And, you check with friends, they're like, nothing will happen. But from January 25th, like by the 28th, it was like, okay, something's happening. This is pretty clear. And I had never written anything at all, ever been published, anything like that. And I just send out a bunch of emails to various papers and things. And the editor of the Washington Post was like, well, you haven't, this sounds interesting, but you haven't written anything. So
You were pitching him like, I
really
could go
work.
and do this as a story.
Well, I said I already had. This was when like everyone was like, whoa, what's it? Because the Muslim Brotherhood after a few days joined the protests, and they were like, oh. So, and nobody had anything from them yet, especially
So
from
you had the
leadership.
inside track.
I'm sitting on it, yeah. And I did a follow-up interview then, talking with them. And so basically foreign policy ran an article that I wrote. It was I wrote a little bit, and then it was just like a transcript of the interview. And then after that, like the Atlantic, BBC, Time, all these outlets, also like picked it up. So yeah, it kind of went wild. But that's that's the thing with this industry is at some point you've got to jump in a bit over your head. That's how you're going to learn,
Yeah.
and getting that chance is always the key part. But so while I was there, I was like, oh, maybe I'll this journalism thing, like do some more writing or stuff. So I sent a cold email to the editor at Rolling Stone. I remember a friend was like, you're crazy. Like you're not you've written one thing, like, come on.
Yeah.
And then he wrote back and he was like, yeah, you should write for us. So I did a first piece about this Egyptian musician, Tamer Hosni, who basically sided with Mubarak, but then tried to, say, oh, I wasn't aware of what was happening in Egypt and stuff. And so that was the first piece I did for him. And then I started doing, just like longer features. In Lebanon, I did a big feature on the war in Syria. And then it kind of just kept progressing into then, video. Because I started to realize that as a writer, unless you're a staff writer, it's really hard to survive off that,
Yeah.
So video was, and it was clear the way the industry is going, like video was, going to be the future, at least if you're going to, make a living off of it.
Yeah. So, and then you just taught yourself how to shoot cameras. and then just went out and did it.
Yeah, self-taught. Would learn by seeing other people do things, and yeah, it's really just kind of like trial and error, and the I think the part that took the longest was knowing what's a story and how to tell a story. I remember, like, when I was first doing it, hearing people say that, like, well, that's not a story, Michael. And I'd get angry, be like, yes, it is, like that. And you're like, but then you realize, you're like, oh yeah, no, it's not. Yeah. And an event happening is not really a story,
Yeah.
You gotta have an
Yeah.
arc, you gotta have characters and really
Yeah.
think about it. So that took a while to get good at seeing the story, how to tell it, thinking active scenes and stuff. And not getting so caught up with. I remember, like early on, you're thinking, oh, I need all this gear, I need the fanciest gear, I need the nicest stuff and things. You're like, no, you don't. Like, you just need the right job, like the right thing. But most importantly, just you better have that story, and you could do anything with, whatever, really.
So, as you know, I always ask guests to come on the podcast and tell me one big beautiful story, to use to use common parlance with the what's going on in the States right now. But no, to come on the podcast and tell us one significant career story, that really sort of stands out in all their experience. So what would you say that story would be, and sort of start us from the beginning and take us from there?
Yeah, so I guess obviously a very big moment was covering the Ukraine war for the New York Times. I think I first had the call, it was early January, and it was becoming clear that Russia was preparing for an invasion. Either that or it was a huge bluff. But
Yeah.
the closer, more time went on, it was pretty clear that this isn't a bluff. This is most likely happening. So, early January, editor New York Times calls. They'd know I'd done quite a bit of conflict and stuff, and I'd worked for them before. And basically, we're planning on, if this invasion happens, this full-scale invasion, and this, and how would we cover it? What's the plan?
Yeah.
So I did a little bit of research and, laid out some stuff, and then, well, I guess it was 3 weeks before the war started, flew into Kyiv.
Yeah.
And then, kind of arrived, worked with, had a local producer there, Taras Ratushny, and he was fantastic. And we basically, just started looking at ways to tell the story of what's happening, and, is the invasion going to happen, and what is this all really about? So, and this was the first time I'd been to Ukraine, so obviously I'm relying heavily on Taras for this.
Yeah, because before you were in the Middle East, at least you could speak like the local language. You knew what was going on, and you can get the
Exactly.
subtle inferences in the interviews and the conversations and navigating situations. But you were kind of like, this is out your comfort zone.
Totally alien, yeah. But it was also refreshing. I mean, it's first time, covering a war where there's snow and winter, and just everything's completely different than what you're used to.
Just before you go into that, like when you jump on the plane and you're going into potential conflict zone, like are you afraid for your life at any point?
I think the worst part is just before you leave. Like it's like you'll be a bit nervous, like leading up to it. Once you're there, it's fine. It's all like, the too much time to think and sitting there waiting is always the worst. But then once you're there, you're good.
You're busy.
Yeah, I mean, they're obviously, like, when we got there, it's like things are semi-normal. I mean, there's signs of preparation of war and everything, we'd be filming with, the U.S. military, British military flying in C-17s, C-130s full of weapons and offloading that. And everyone knew, like, something's brewing and coming. But for the most part, it's, still strangely normal until it isn't, and so we were we'd be doing various stories about, the kind of like macro stuff that a lot of this is about. It's about Russian gas going to Europe, Ukraine obviously moving away from Russia, wanting to join Europe, things like this. And so, you're doing your normal job, but like looking at, these were longer features, like 4-minute pieces and things. And then all the while too, looking at, okay, if this starts, what's the plan? Some colleagues wanted to be in the East. I had decided, that if this did happen, that it was most likely going to be a blitz style, going for Kyiv, probably going for Zelensky, going for all the leadership, and this was going to be a very fast, something could happen very fast, and the story would ultimately be in Kyiv, and that you'd want to be wary about being too far away, where if they blow through those lines, now you're in Russian, behind Russian lines, and you're probably going to be detained. As an American, you'd probably be lucky enough to be detained and then
deported,
be released. If you're Ukrainian, there's a lot of people that killed or disappeared. You don't know what happened. So yeah, as it got closer, I remember, you start doing the prep where you're like, okay, this is probably going to happen. So, we're just using, drivers around. But we knew if the war started, a lot of these people were going to get called up to serve. So I went and rented a car, stocked up on fuel, food, water, just everything where you're like, okay, if we get stuck for a while, have a few weeks of supplies so you're good. And then also have things be mobile where if you have to walk out, you can do that too. So doing all that prep. And then I remember it was 2 nights before the invasion started, Putin had his long kind of just this long diatribe where he's speaking about, the history of Ukraine and Russia and the Russian Empire and everything. And I remember hearing that and going, okay, this is happening. This is absolutely happening. And then someone at the U.S. Defense Department told us it was going to start around like 3 a.m. I think it was 3 a.m. on a Wednesday. And I remember waking up and like you could hear they bombed the airport first. Just a few airstrikes on the airport, just, disabling that. And then that was the first day that was, at least around Kyiv, that was it. They basically, started moving in from Kharkiv, and up from Belarus, and then everyone was leaving Kyiv, basically. They gave enough time for, basically everyone loaded up in their cars and started driving to Poland or Moldova. Wow. And and then you've got fighter jets, kind of like screaming ahead, just like going around, and you're kind of looking up going, is that Ukrainian or is it Russian? Like, where are we? What's happening? And the Russians, they moved incredibly fast. At first they kind of they blew through a lot of places. I think it was the second night that they arrived in the outskirts of Kyiv. You'd see the tracers going, explosions, and I woke up one morning and there was like a bit of a, I'm not sure what kind of munition it was. I want to say a bit of a cluster bomb, but it was right, like missed the car by like 6 inches right outside the hotel.
Seriously?
Yeah. I came out and one of the guys was like, "Is this your car?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Very lucky." I was like, "Yeah, okay." Yeah.
As he proceeded to sort of gently kick the cluster bomb down the road a little bit, like a football.
Yeah. And I was just like, man, I'm glad I got the full insurance on the car too. Funny thing about that car is, it stayed on. Like I just kept renewing it for the New York Times even after I left, and everyone used it. Like that car, I mean, just got like it's been through a lot. Like at some point, one of the guys like messaged, he saw the car and it was like, one of the doors was just like kind of like smashed or something, and he's like, "Hey, I saw the car. Are you guys okay?" Or like, I'm like, "Oh yeah, yeah, it's all right."
Oh my God. So wait, so that was like an Avis or like just a rental
Yeah.
car from a.
Yeah. Yeah.
So would love to be the person that takes that back to them and be like, it's missing 3 doors, it's riddled with bullets. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, can we just get the insurance on this?
I mean, all they had said was just make sure you don't take it into, any of the Russian controlled areas of Ukraine, like Luhansk or Donetsk. Yeah, because they were like, "Oh, don't bring it to any conflict zone." But then after that, it was like, well, everything's a conflict zone. It's like, there's nothing we can do really. So waking those first few days were, it was like you're in disbelief, and you're wondering like, ooh, how, which way is this going to swing? Also at that time too is like, it was very eerie. Like most people were out of Kyiv. Most people had left.
Yeah.
So you're in the city just like empty on its own, and occasionally there would be sometimes there would be, I'm not sure if it was like Russian like sleeper cell, or other times we found out that they would tell Russian soldiers like, "Oh, Kyiv's liberated, go ahead," like, and so you'd have all of a sudden just like a 5-car convoy just driving in thinking everything's fine, and then they just get completely lit up.
What?
Yeah,
So
I remember that.
oh my.
That happened a few days into it. Yeah, they were told like, "Oh yeah," I think someone told them they surrendered or it was fine. They're like, go ahead. So they're just nonchalantly cruising in and just got absolutely obliterated.
Are you filming any of this, or is this like through stories that you through contacts?
No, that was we'd found out you could hear the fighting going on, and then it was the next day you could see all the cars and everything burnt out.
Man. Jeez.
And then so we got out of Kyiv. It was basically, the timing was, things were closing up, but there was one way out. You could get kind of like through the south. And so we went like about 70 kilometers out of the city. And then, we arrive in this small little town. There's a little hotel we can stay at, kind of mom and pop bed and breakfast place. And, they tell us like, okay, at 8 p.m. we turn off, the whole town turns off their lights. So, the Russians can't see us, which I was like, they've got radar and maps and stuff. This isn't World War II, the Blitz in London, but okay, fine, whatever. So, it's like, okay, out of here, like rural area, should be fine. I'm like, go to take a shower. I get out of the shower, and then all of a sudden, not far away, a rocket just boom comes in. The window almost just like pops open. And it was really, really shocking. You're like, whoa, shit. You get the sense of feeling like, okay, we're out, we're safe, it's good. And then that happens. And then this the old woman who was running the place is banging on doors, telling people to come down. And I don't have any clothes on, also. She just opens the doors like, come. And I'm like, oh, okay, all right. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna get dressed. I'm
If I'm getting bombed,
might not seem
I'd
practical,
rather be
but
dressed.
it's like I'm not gonna die naked and have have that image there. So
Wow.
yeah, but and then making our way to, after that we decided to make our way to Lviv, which is in the west. Mm-hmm. And the Russians weren't there, so we went kept down south and then came up there. So you go around where the Russians were, and
you're just picking up stories as you go.
Picking up stories as we go. Like we went to, like, there's the next place we stayed was a children's school.
Yeah.
And some people were sheltered there. At first, when we pulled up, everyone was very wary of, like, they didn't trust anyone who wasn't from they're thinking, or, these spies or whatever. So, at first it was actually quite tense when we pulled up. And then once they figured out, who we are and stuff, they were, very welcoming, and kind of sheltered down there and slept for the night, filmed some stuff, then headed to Lviv. And, from there filming where all the refugees, people are heading to Poland, hopping on trains, trying to get out. Yeah, it's, is every night you're getting maybe 4 hours of sleep.
Jeez.
And but you're running on so much adrenaline and stuff, and it's quite spectacular. So you don't feel that, I guess, exhaustion until it takes a few weeks for it then all of a sudden to be like, once it's always I think the first 2 weeks of any conflict or war are always usually the most intense. It's where the biggest push happens, and then lines will, or first month maybe, and then things will kind of more solidify, like it's the pace slows a bit.
That's chaotic.
And that's usually then when you start feeling like exhausted. So, which after the first month, then I switched over to the series you and I worked together on. But that was when then I went right from that to the Arctic. So, minus 40 Celsius, 45 Celsius, and polar bears, from the war in Ukraine to that. So it was a really, really stark contrast between the two.
Jeez.
Yeah.
So with the Ukraine thing, like you were there for a month, like I'm just curious because that's an evolving, when you're doing news, it's like an evolving situation. And like I guess the editor kind of goes, you've got enough stories, come back. Or is there like a set thing, we're going to send you out for a month, and then they don't really want to keep you out any longer than that because people start getting, as you say, worn out and that kind of stuff?
No, I mean, for something like that, it's just, I mean, we're doing sometimes a story a day for every 2 days. Like they're just like, just keep going as long as stuff's happening.
Jeez.
So there's lots to do. At first it's like dailies. Like the first day was people fleeing Kyiv and the war starting. The second day was civil defense forces, average citizens lining up to get weapons. Yep. And, them distributing that, and people preparing, to defend Kyiv. And then third day was, there was a big rocket attack on a building. Yeah. So, that hit, and then we run there. Jeez. So then it's, like the first bit of that stuff is usually, reactive. Yeah. And then once things slow down a bit, then it's like, okay, we can take more time. So yeah, it's really, with that stuff, it's as long as stuff's happening, you find you just keep moving around, keep finding stories. There's always something to tell there,
And so did you, when you got recalled, did you get out through Poland, or how did you get out of Ukraine?
Yeah, we drove from Lviv to the border, which was like an hour. Yeah. And then the line of cars was so long, like we just got out and then had to carry our stuff, which luckily one of the security guys was with me, John, who helped me carry my stuff. And he was, I mean, film wise, you'd know, it was actually quite light compared to what, normally you would have for film shoots. Yeah. It was like, I had one Pelican case, my big camera bag, tripod, and my backpack, and a duffel. Like that, it was like sleeping bag and other stuff and things for just general kind of, if you had to camp or survive. And he was just like, what is all this stuff? And I told him, I was like, John, this is not a lot of film stuff. Like, this is actually light. But we had to carry it like, I don't know, it was like 4 miles. And it was like a kind of like dirt road, just sort of, it was, that was tough. And then, so you're slogging all this stuff, and then we get to the border, and obviously, it's thousands of people. Yeah. And they're, trying to process people and stuff. I think we spent it took 8 hours to get across to cross into Poland. Just, processing everyone. And we ended up getting over there at like 1 a.m., something like that. And then a guy drove us from the border to Warsaw, where stayed at the airport hotel. So then I remember I went to sleep, and I was so used to hearing, jets and things, fighter jets or the airstrikes that when I first heard, one of the airplanes coming in or like taking off, like I immediately jumped out of my bed, And then like, because usually what you do, it's like you roll onto the floor, get in the bathroom, get the, the best cover you can have.
Yeah.
And I remember just being like, oh, and not knowing where I was. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, wait, you're in Warsaw. You're out there. It's fine. It's fine. But your body naturally, doesn't, it's just so conditioned to that after a while.
That must be nuts. Like, I know the feeling of like ending a shoot and getting on a plane, but like for you, jumping on that flight home, like it must have been an immense feeling, like reflecting on what you'd experienced. Like what were those emotions when flying home?
It's kind of like that's when you start, like, you process things a bit, it's kind of overwhelming. There's definitely some relief. There's also like, you feel a bit of guilt that you're one of your privilege that you get to pick up and leave. You get to go home. Your home isn't affected. You get to go back to a normal life. Whereas, the people you'd been working with and know there and been speaking with there, they don't get to leave. That is their life now. And you don't know what's going to happen or change for them. So yeah, it's bittersweet, it's definitely a mix of emotions, that's for sure.
What would you say, like, kind of off the back of that, or even any of the projects you've done, would be like an ultimate career goal? Would it be like winning an Emmy, or like, would it be more important that like a story that you did sort of change the course of a government's decision or something like that? What would be sort of something that would be the ultimate goal for you in your career?
Yeah, I think, awards are, I forgot who said this, but someone said awards are like hemorrhoids. After a while, every asshole gets one, and I've gotten a few, and it's like, it's nice to be recognized, and you're like, okay, great. Like, obviously, getting an Oscar for a documentary film would be pretty great.
Yeah.
But again, I think like it's still, it doesn't really change much. Like your goal should be, my goal is to tell great stories. I want to make films. I want to keep making art and finding new stories, finding, ways to lift up voices. That's for me what it's about.
Nice. And so it's worth the risk, obviously, clearly. Obviously there's you're a freelancer as well. And it's not, as with any cinematographer, I know there's a huge investment in equipment that's required, which, it's not cheap. It's cheaper than it used to be, but still you've got to have a huge investment there. But I guess you get, remunerators or paid well accordingly.
Yeah. When you're working, you get paid well. There's long periods, it'll be intense periods of working and then lots of downtime.
Yeah.
You're not getting rich on this. That's for sure. Yeah. Like, I don't know anybody who does it for money.
For the money. Yeah. That's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
I just find like any advice for anyone that wanted to listen to this episode and gone, given everything you said, like, yeah, I want to do that. Like, what advice would you give anyone trying to jump into it?
I think that I get a lot of people asking about like, oh, I want to be a foreign journalist or conflict and stuff, and they think that they need to like hop on a flight and go, across the world to the hottest place, or wherever things are the most intense. But I'd say first things first is focus on how knowing how to tell a story, and that there's a lot of stuff around here. Like, especially I look at America now, I'm spending more time shooting here because there's a lot going on, and it's really, really important, and it's a pretty key moment. And I think that it's especially helped having this other perspective of living outside of the U.S. for over 15 years now, and being able to see this with fresh eyes. As when I come here, like this feels more like covering a foreign country.
That's weird.
And so I think trying to tell people, say, if from your own country, like try and look at it that way. Because there are stories all around you there, and start there first, and then make the jump when the timing's right.
Bro. All right, Michael Downey, Thank you so much. I mean, just before you jump off, I always like to sort of say, is there anything you want to plug? Any docs that have come out recently that people can watch? Any shows or even social media they can follow you anywhere?
That's one thing I'm terrible at, actually, is self-promotion.
Hey, well, I'm trying to give you a platform. Be like, hey, promote yourself.
I know. I need to get way better at that. I mean, I post like maybe 4 times a year on Instagram. I'm just like, ugh. I'm one of those where I'm like, just give me the camera and just let me make something, and then someone else take care of that. But you can check out my website, michael-downey.com, or on Instagram, Michael Downey Photo. And occasionally I'm putting updates on my work and stuff there. Maybe I need to get a little bit better about that. But yeah, I'd say that's really it. There'll be some stuff coming out. Got the short film for Channel 4, that should be out in a few weeks. And then my short doc that I've been doing in depth on the immigration situation with ICE and activists and migrants, that editing part of. Hopefully we'll have a second shoot block, and that I assume will be out sometime September, October.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit later.
Brilliant.
So,
and I was going to say that for anyone interested in that Zingarella story, I think your show reel, the first frame of your show reel is in that cave. I remember the drone.
Exactly. Is the cave. That was such a blast to light. It looked,
light tubes. And
I
everything.
loved that.
Unfortunately, that was the last shot that drone ever did before it committed suicide.
Yeah. That was wild. Yeah, the drone just went berserk at something
200 meters down in
some kind of magnetic rock.
Yeah. Poor thing wasn't designed to be.
I remember Mateo being like, "Stop! You're hitting the wall." I'm like, "I'm not doing it." I know when repeatedly smashed the drone into the wall. It's like it's doing it on its own.
Poor drone, man. It just couldn't handle being. It's like, I need a satellite to talk to. You're like, nah. No.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Exactly.
Cool. All right, man. Well, listen, always great chatting to you, and
absolutely
take it easy and stay safe.
All right. Thanks. Take care.
And that is it for this week's episode. I just want to say a massive thank you again to Michael for taking the time to share his experiences, and a massive thank you to you all as well for listening. For photos, links, and more about this episode, head to noordinarymonday.com and look for the episode page. You can find us also on our socials, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and more. If you need help finding us, go to Linktree. Our handle is No Ordinary Monday. Next week's episode is not one for the faint-hearted, especially for anyone with claustrophobia or a fear of the dark. My guest is Dr. Hazel Barton, a leading cave scientist and expert caver. She relives a near-death experience when she was deep inside a cave which started flooding due to a freak weather event. It's a really crazy story, so hit subscribe now so you don't miss out on that episode. If you have questions or want to share your own career story with us, we'd love to hear from you. Please get in touch via our socials. Or you can email hello, HELLO, at noordinarymonday.com, or use the Submit Your Story page on our website. And if you enjoyed this episode, please do 2 really quick things for us. Click 5 stars, and if you have time, give us a review. And the other thing is, tell a friend. That's it. It really helps us grow the show, attract more amazing guests, and inspires new listeners. This show is produced, hosted, and edited by me, Chris Barron. Thank you so much for listening, and have a great Monday, everyone.